What's up, everybody? It is emergency podcast time as Ryan kind of glares down at his phone. He doesn't want to tip the head all the way down
Not
like
tipping it
this.
all the
We
way
talked
down.
about that on the last episode. But you get down there. You retweet that episode right now because it's an emergency podcast. The Bills have agreed to a 4-year contract extension with star cornerback Christian Benford. Something that we've been talking about for a couple of weeks. Will it, won't it happen this offseason? The Bills get it done well ahead of the NFL draft, leaving James Cook as the lone unsigned extension candidate this offseason. They've done almost all of them, right? Benford's the latest in a long line of Greg Rousseau, Terrell Bernard,
Khalil
Shakir. I mean, it has been extension season for the Buffalo Bills. This is the Shout Podcast. He's Ryan Talbot. What's up, buddy?
Hey, not too much. It's always good to have some news to talk about on a Saturday. And like you mentioned, I don't think it's a coincidence that the one that was most vocal about the contract is the one sitting without a new contract right now. For Benford, this comes in, it looks like to me, Matt, like a great deal for the Bills.
Yeah, we're going to get into the structure of the deal. We don't know all the details yet. We know the parameters when the numbers come out in terms of year-by-year breakdown, like where all the guarantee sits. We'll get a more clear picture, but we can obviously talk about what this initial number means for the Bills. It's a reported 4-year, $76 million contract. And the AAV comes in, Ryan, at $19 million per season, considerably lower. I mean, if you think about the big contract extensions that have happened this offseason, J.C. Horn for the Carolina Panthers, his new deal comes in at $25 million. What was the other one that came in at a record $30 million? I'm blanking on his name right now.
Same draft. Why is that? That's going to bother me now.
Oh, no. I just had it.
I was looking at the graphic. I was just looking at the graphic. And then obviously you're still going to have Sauce Gardner coming in here soon too with a new deal. And now I can't find said graphic, of course.
We'll come back to that in a second. But where Christian Benford falls in the pecking order is 13 among cornerbacks. Think about this, Ryan. He signs this extension in March, 5 or 6 months before the start of the season. By the time you get to next offseason, when he would have been set to become a free agent, we could be talking about Benford being outside the top 20 in terms of AAV, or at least hovering around that number. It is a huge signing at a very team-friendly number.
Extremely team-friendly. Comments have it. Derek Stingley Jr., same draft class as Sauce Gardner, picked before him, if I'm remembering correctly, and he's played like an all-pro type player. But Benford is that guy that is not a household name right now, but has been playing to the level of those other players. He doesn't have the gaudy interception stats. Those are the areas where maybe he's lacking a little bit, but he earned an all-pro vote this season based on his play. The yards per route I mentioned in the article in terms of where he was at 0.51 yards per coverage snap allowed, the best in the league at the cornerback position. He is a difference maker. He came in as a 6th-round pick out of Villanova. Beat out Kaiir Elam for one of the jobs, showed that he was a really good fit, started 9 games as a rookie, has started 30 games over the last 2 years, and really locked down that starting position for Buffalo. And now you have him here for 4 more years.
I wanted to ask you how you view Benford and Elam in this kind of bucket, because one of the comments underneath the tweet that I put out before we started this show was, whenever you think about Kaiir Elam and him not working out, you have to think about the absolute hit in the 6th round that Christian Benford has been. Do you feel like it's because it happened in the same draft, or even if it didn't happen in the same draft, finding a true number 1 cornerback that I think probably would have had even more value had he landed on the free agent open market, kind of gives Bean a pass for missing so badly on Elam?
Yeah, anytime that happens, I think the GM in that role gets a pass. And going way back before Brandon Beane's time, I've mentioned this before, John McCargo being an extremely high pick of the Bills, not working out. Same draft class, though, Kyle Williams, who, is a beloved person in Buffalo, a beloved player, a Wall of Fame caliber type of player throughout his career. Every now and then that's going to happen. The draft is a crapshoot. You have scouts that are monitoring these players year round for many years, but that's still not an exact science. There's still so many busts every year in round 1, round 2, and gems that are found on late day 3 UDFAs that play in this league for 10 plus years. So when you do find someone, especially in the same draft class, the way that he did, you certainly get a bit of a pass. And especially the fact that we're still able to get any kind of value for Elam on the trade market this year also helps soften that blow.
His initial cap hit in this season was going to be $3.31 million. We'll see if that changes at all. Sometimes with, you can kind of get a little bit of extra room. There's a lot of like moving parts. There haven't been, some of the big time restructures that had been talked about before the start of free agency. Deion Dawkins was one. Dawson Knox was another one. Although to me, Knox is a little bit tricky. We could talk about that as who are true restructure candidates. I mean, you restructure Dawson Knox and now you add probably a season onto what you're already committed to. And I don't know if that's necessarily the world that you want to live in. But we don't know if the Bills have restructured Dawkins. We also don't know, and maybe you can answer this, and if not, we'll get our good buddy Mike Giannetti back on the podcast. I wonder if even after the huge mega deal with Allen, if they can restructure that even this offseason, or if it has to wait until the new league year next year because it is a new contract on the books. I don't know the details of that, but that could be another mechanism to add a little room. But they're obviously doing this in terms of opening up space as they need it to be able to get deals done. This is potentially a deal that can open up a little wiggle room if they need it.
Yeah, and for the Allen question, I don't believe that you can restructure a new deal. I'm not 100% certain on that, though. So you're right. Mike Giannetti would be the best source to go to for that question. But yeah, the Bills are pressing levers when needed. If they need some more money for their draft class, they could do one of the restructures that you just talked about. We'll find out. We'll have a better picture of where they're at cap-wise once we get the financial details of this Christian Benford deal. But the Bills have, drafted, developed, retained. It's been their motto. It's been what they've said they're going to do since Brandon Beane came on board. And they've proved it again with all of the extensions that you laid out here early in the show. The Bills are taking care of their own first and then trying to supplement those missing pieces via free agency and now via the draft, which is less than 1 month away.
All 4 of these player extensions, Ryan, I'm throwing Josh Allen out of here just to talk about this. The 4 that we mentioned, Shakir, Benford, Bernard, and Rousseau, all come in, I don't want to say significantly, but generously under what I think people would have expected for these extensions. I mean, Benford's is probably the most team-friendly deal, but if you think about the going rate for former first-round draft picks that are rushing off the edge, getting Rousseau in at $20 million per season is massive. I thought the Bills were going to probably be looking in that $16 to $19 million range for an extension with Benford. They landed at 19. And I say that only because, and why I put that window for the number, because the interception numbers haven't been there. But if you go into next season and Benford has the kind of season that he did this past season, and then adds the interception numbers, intercepts 4, 5, 6 passes, now you're talking about the next threshold of money. I mean, it probably would have taken 28, 29, 30, $31 million a year to keep him. This gets ahead of it. It rewards a guy. And I don't know, my initial impressions of Benford over the last couple of seasons covering him, he isn't a very brash kind of guy. He seems to be a guy that rolls around in sweats most of the time, isn't flashing a lot of things like a lot of players are. To me, he seems like a guy to me that would make $19 million work for him the way that some people would make $30 million work for them, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And all the deals, as you mentioned, have come in below the threshold of what you're looking for. You're hoping Greg Rousseau takes that next step as a pass rusher. He's been at 8 twice in his career now. I think maybe some of the Bills' system, the way that they play the run, the way that they stay at home might affect why he hasn't had double-digit sacks. But $20 million per year is going to look like a deal in due time. Khalil Shakir came in under what a lot of people were expecting. Terrell Bernard as well. And then now you have this deal where, like you said, he's the 13th highest paid cornerback, and Sauce Gardner is going to get a new deal. And the list is going to go on. And before you know it, he's going to be in the lower half of the number 1 cornerbacks on teams. As for the interceptions and things of that nature, I don't think it was there this past season because I feel like teams were kind of targeting Rasul Douglas a little bit. Douglas had a down year. It felt like the players in his coverage areas were getting open more easily. When Benford was tested, he was making plays, pass breakups. The figure I laid out there, the yards per route run, kind of just shows you how elite he was at that. And Brett Coleman, a content creator that I like a lot, as soon as the deal got done, he wrote, "Oh, look, the Bills got another discount on a contract that's 40% lower than the top of the market because they signed their guy as soon as possible." What a concept. So the Bills getting ahead of things, they deserve a lot of credit for that, specifically Brandon Beane and the rest of the front office there, looking at who are their priorities, because we've seen how this can drag on with players and how much money the Bengals, for instance, just paid out to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and they have them both locked down long term now. But had they been a little bit more proactive, they probably could have had both players at a much lower rate because of what the going rate was at that time, maybe 1 year earlier.
Sorry to cut you off there, buddy. Got the little some big news coming, and I'm getting that dialed up. We're going to talk about the what this means potentially for James Cook in a moment, but we are coming back to Turning Stone, and we are super, super pumped. It's Matt Parrino here, one half of the Shout Buffalo Football podcast, and we have some big news coming up for April. We're coming back to Turning Stone Resort Casino for a live draft event. Ryan Talbot, Matt Parrino at New York Rec and Social Club, April 24th at 8 p.m. Come out. It's going to be a live watch party. We'll be hanging out with Bills fans, talking about the lead up to their pick. We'll even do a live in-venue show where we go over all the action that happened and how it potentially affects the Bills as we get to their pick. It's a live episode of Shout, so grab your crew, come out and meet us at one of New York's best sports lounges with more than 60 high-definition TVs, all your favorite bar and table games, and their in-house sports book, TS Sports. Ryan Talbot and I can't wait to see you April 24th inside the New York Rec and Social Club at Turning Stone Resort Casino. You must be 18 years or older to attend. Please bet responsibly. There you have it. I can't wait, Ryan. We're going to be back at Turning Stone the night of the draft, and it is going to be a live show like we've never done before, because we're going to end up doing two shows. The live one during the draft where we're kind of reacting to picks in the venue. We'll stream that obviously on all of our platforms, but then we'll obviously do the Bills specific episode right after the first round. It is going to be a jam-packed night at Turning Stone. So make your plans right now. If you're in driving distance, if you want to fly in and make a weekend out of it and hang out at Turning Stone for the weekend, do it. This is going to be an awesome, fun time. Yeah,
unbelievable venue. We had a great atmosphere last show. There's a fantastic Syracuse football game that was ongoing. We waited till that ended. It's going to be an unbelievable atmosphere on night one of the draft as well. I'm sure it'll be a packed house, but come out and join us.
We're also coming back to Wingnuts, the OG over on Millersport Highway, April 19th. Get that in your calendar. More to come on that. That'll be our live mock draft on the Bills' first round pick. So we can't wait for that. All right. So James Cook, he has not been bashful about where he thinks things stand in terms of what he deserves on his next contract. Running back has been a position that it hasn't gotten paid the same way consistently across the board. A lot of these other premier positions have gotten paid, and we've seen a little bit of a departure with that, with Saquon Barkley having the big season in Philadelphia that he had. But to me, he's kind of like this one-of-one kind of example. You have Christian McCaffrey, who signed his big contract extension. Derrick Henry's getting a little bit up there in age. And then the thing going against James Cook is he's not necessarily that bell cow back, right? They lean on all three guys in this running back room. And, he had the numbers last year. He scored 16 touchdowns. He's critical to what the Bills do on offense. But I can't see the Bills meeting that $15 million per season number. A lot of people in the comments right now talking about this Benford deal feels like almost a message to James Cook in a lot of ways. And I don't necessarily know if that was Brandon Beane's intent, but it does come across as a guy that was probably headed towards really big time money on the open market next offseason. To stay at the number that he stayed at, it does feel like a little bit of a message, but I don't get the sense that James Cook is going to come too much down off of his $15 million price point.
No, and that could be the problem. In these negotiations, you have to find that middle ground, and we don't know what the Bills are offering, and we have a good idea of what James Cook wants. That's where we're at right now. Can they find a middle ground that is something that Cook would be agreeable to? Maybe it's more guaranteed money, a shorter term deal, so that way he has another chance to cash in. I'm not sure what the answer is there, but Brandon Beane did not rule out extending James Cook on a recent podcast appearance. Said that he was still, having negotiations or talks with the reps for both Benford at that time and Cook. So never say never. It's just one of those things where I don't think that the Bills are going to keep going back to the well if they keep getting told 15 million is our number. Eventually, Cook either has to come down or he might just play out this rookie contract and have to go elsewhere. As you mentioned, there's some reasons why the Bills are probably a little hesitant to give him that full 15, not being a 3-down back, still having that weakness as a pass blocker, not being one of those complete franchise all-around backs that teams look for.
We got a couple of questions in here. We'll go to Alex Barber in a moment. Aaron Prevost over on YouTube with the super chat. We appreciate you. Is Ryan Vandemark a trade candidate with OT depth being what it is, and the fact that, he's not asking this, but I'm kind of interjecting this. Tylen Grable, after being out most of his rookie season, comes back and sends Vandemark back to the bench. I think this is an interesting question to ponder a little bit. He's obviously somebody that the Bills think highly of. He could play both tackle positions. The only depth tackle on the roster right now that's played significant snaps and has played well in those spots has been Ryan Vandemark. So Grable to me is a little bit of a projection, but a day 3 pick of this regime. They've done really good at finding talent in the draft. How do you view Vandemark? And is it something like, you can never have too much offensive line talent? And I don't know if Brandon Beane's necessarily in the business of moving off of a piece that he knows can play, because I don't know how much you're going to get back for him. I mean, even if you got like a 5th round pick, the Bills got 3 of those going into this draft.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he's shown a willingness to trade guys like Ryan Bates a few years back, but I think it goes to you can never have too much talent on the O-line point. He's locked into a 1-year, $1.03 million deal. I think that the Bills have a great value on Ryan Vandemark at that point. Even if he somehow loses the swing tackle job to Grable or anyone else, you can never have enough talent. When you have someone at that rate, why would you be, looking to move off of him? Unless you got a deal that just blew you away, you keep players like that on your roster because you're one injury away from needing them, whether it's then having to have, a Grable in the starting lineup or a Vandemark in the starting lineup and the other guy being the swing tackle. You can never have too much depth.
We talked about the conversation happening in the comments here. We might as well chime in on it. Very active chat room today, so we appreciate you.
Love it.
Anthony Romeo, one of our regular insiders, he came out to our last Turning Stone show, so I hope to see you out there again, buddy. He brings up the franchise tag for James Cook, and I think that could be ultimately an option for the Bills, although and listen, I think that James Cook, for all the bluster this offseason, the social media drama, I saw our buddy Jeremy White tweet out, James Cook social media watch has begun after the Benford news dropped, because, you wonder how this is going to sit with a player. I don't think he's ever going to be a kind of guy that's going to cause problems, right? Like,
right.
He's respected in the room. He's really important to what they are offensively. For all the talk that we just had about not maybe meeting that $50 million number, I do think he's a valuable part of this offense. And I think finding some type of medium place to land at, whether it be $11 or $12 million a season, especially projecting where the cap's going to go over the next couple of years, I could probably stomach that a little bit more, even though I've often said on this show that I'm not in the camp of paying big time money for running backs. I view Cook a little bit differently because I think of how he can be used. How do you feel about the franchise tag? Because it gets funny. It's affordable in that moment, and it gives you an extra year of James Cook. But the fairness to the player, a guy that they believe so much in, they've raved about him on the sideline, in the locker room, all those kinds of things. At the end of that season, which would be his 5th in the NFL, we know the shelf life for running backs isn't necessarily great. What do you think about that approach and Brandon Beane, who hasn't made a habit of that, going that direction?
I'm not ruling it out, but I would be surprised if they went the franchise tag route. I think there's a variety of reasons. One, the Bills feel really good about Ray Davis. They like him a lot. When he was able to have an extended start or extended snaps in a start, he showed very well for himself going into year two. I expect his ceiling to go up even further in terms of what he can do and what he can bring to this offense. They have Ty Johnson back in the fold. They like his game a lot. And in today's NFL, you can draft these guys every 4 or 5 years in those middle rounds, 2, 3, 4, and find players that can come in and contribute immediately. So I don't think it's necessarily going to be something that Brandon Beane does. And I'm not trying to downplay James Cook's importance, especially last year. He was a great player. He can catch the ball, run the ball, break off big runs at the snap of a finger. It's just the fact that they already have some talent there, and I feel like they can add more to it via draft. This year included, possibly, if they really feel like it's not going to go or work out between the two sides, but especially in the 2026 draft.
If you're watching on YouTube, thank you for joining us on this Saturday. A little bit of an impromptu episode as the Bills drop some big news on a Saturday with Christian Benford getting a 4-year contract extension. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel as well on YouTube. We really appreciate it. If you're watching on X, hit that like button there and retweet it, re-exit. I don't know. They haven't found a new term for that, Ryan. So we're still kind of trying to figure out what that is now that it's called X. I still like Twitter. So hopefully Elon gets rid of it and we can just go back to calling it Twitter and get rid of this whole X business. All right. Alex, one of our regular viewers, cornerback is considered a premium position at the moment, but I would be curious why that is. I think that's an interesting discussion. Like, where does cornerback fall for you in terms of the pecking order of premium positions? I mean, you think about wide receiver, you think about tackle, you think about edge rusher, and maybe even interior elite defensive tackle. Does cornerback come before any of those 4 positions? And obviously we didn't even mention quarterback.
Fourth. It comes in fourth for me. Quarterback first, then I'm going to cheat and say offensive tackle, because you could list left tackle and right tackle as their own entities, and then it pushes cornerback down further. But offensive tackle, pass rusher, and then cornerback. And cornerback, if you have a lockdown player, a player that you feel like on one side of the field you have full confidence in is going to be able to hold their own week in, week out, that does a lot for your defense in terms of how you're going to play your safeties, what you can do on a given week. They don't necessarily shadow with their corners, so that's not something that you're going to see out of Benford. So he's not going to always go on the opposing team's number 1 wide receiver, but he does such a fantastic job on his side that for the Bills at $19 million, it probably felt like a no-brainer on their end, seeing that you have J.C. Horn getting $25 million, Derek Stingley Jr. getting $30, Sauce Gardner probably topping that number as well. And it's the value meets the price point for the Bills in that area. And it's the same thing a few years ago when they locked up Trey White in the big extension. Having someone that can lock down a portion of your field makes life that much easier for your defense.
Some quick commentary on Cook here that I want to respond to. Anthony also suggesting maybe a tag and trade option. That's interesting to consider, because I think if you're Brandon Beane and you get a read on this situation, right? Like, okay, how is this going? You have a feel for your players and what it's going to be like in the room and how you perceive a guy to handle a contract negotiation that's going to be ongoing for multiple months. If you think that ends up being the case, trading him could be an interesting scenario, especially if you get to the draft and you feel like, you know what, we can get up and get somebody and we could throw Cook into a deal to sweeten the pot. If you don't feel like you're going to ultimately get on the same page, because he knows like the dealings with the agent, the relationship that they have with the agents, all of those little bits of information that we're all not privy to on the outside, that's all a piece of this. And it's hard to project this because it seems like from the outside looking in, they love the player and conversations are probably going to be ongoing. But if you think that you're at maybe a stalemate, that makes a trade a little bit more possible. But I don't think you want to take the player out of the situation because of what he means to the offense. And could they find another player to fill that role? Of course. I mean, Ray Davis could go off next season. He could develop into another great running back in his own right. He could do a lot of the same things that Cook does. But I think projecting that and knowing what Cook's already been in the offense, those are two different things.
Right. Yeah. I'm not looking to offload Cook, who's under contract for a reasonable $5 million plus per season this year. But if I'm the Bills, I'm looking to give Davis more opportunities to see what he can do, given the carries, given the blocking, given the opportunities to catch the ball out of the backfield. He had some nice moments in his rookie season in all three areas. So you keep someone that's very important to your offense in James Cook, as he showed this past season. You give Davis a little bit more runway in his second year, and then Ty Johnson continues to play the Ty Johnson role, blocking in pivotal moments. You trust him on third down. He's a great route runner as well and gets open in the passing game. And you let the chips fall where they may at the end of this season if you don't extend James Cook before week one of that year. You don't want to get rid of an asset just to get rid of one, especially when I don't think you're going to get great value on a James Cook, a running back entering the final year of his rookie deal.
Bryce Clark chiming in with a super chat. Could Cook be traded for a pick swap in the first round? We kind of just covered that. We appreciate you talking or submitting a super chat. That's always an option if you're watching on YouTube to get involved in the conversation. I saw one comment on X from, I don't really know the, it's kind of just a bunch of letters. So, but whatever. Not to like try to dunk on the guy, but he says waste of money on a system cornerback in terms of Christian Benford's extension. And I think, like, to start with, that's an interesting way to look at it, because I get the line of thinking. Like, we had Derek Klassen on from the Athletic Football Show, who said he had ranked Christian Benford low on the priority list of extensions because he thinks that Sean McDermott can develop cornerbacks and find a way to put another guy in that spot and get somewhere close to that, where it's harder to find some of these players in other positions. That's a fine way to look at it. But I would argue against calling Christian Benford just a system cornerback, because part of it is, yeah, sure, being good in the system. But if you find somebody that's good in your system, you probably want to try to keep him in the system, because that's where he plays his best football. So I think Tre'Davious White signing a big time extension when he did, and then coming back, and listen, I know he had the injury. He was never the same after the injury, but you're talking about a player in those couple of seasons that was really important to what the Bills did. And before Benford came along, I think cornerback was such a serious concern until Benford came along and solidified things there again. So I would push back against the concept that you can't pay guys that maybe wouldn't project the same way elsewhere. I just don't think that you should overpay those players. And by all the reaction, anywhere that you look across the internet today, everybody's talking about what this looks like, and that being an underpay on Benford.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll push back with too is when people say, you know, Sean McDermott can find another player to play a certain type of role on a team. He has a good track record doing that, but it's not that simple. They took a first round cornerback that didn't fit their system, despite having great speed, despite being very knowledgeable and having all the tools in the toolbox to be a really good corner. He just couldn't adapt to the system. So yeah, he's found, you know, Christian Benford in round 6. He found Dane Jackson. They have found UDFAs and other players that have stepped up in roles in terms of depth. But it's not just something where you can go out and sign a corner and it's an automatic lock that they're going to make this team and be an instant contributor. They have a good track record, but think of all the corners that they've added late in drafts as UDFAs that don't stick, that don't make it. They may have let a good one walk away or get away from them, and Alex Austin, who the Patriots seem to like a lot. So they have a great track record, but it's not something that is foolproof, just that you can plug a body in and it's going to work in this scheme or this system.
Before we get out of here, Ryan, I got to let everybody in watching about the savagery of Ryan Talbot in the middle of an emergency podcast. Talbot's out here quote tweeting Chiefs fans. A Chiefs fan responded to one of his Benford tweets about this being obviously the value. And this guy says, that's what he's worth. Y'all just overvalue him. LOL. And Ryan quote tweets this guy and says, I can't imagine coming on his social media on a nice Saturday just to admit that I don't know ball, but you do you. Talbot with the thug life glasses. I got to get the meme out there.
Just dropping them down on me. I'm sorry. That always bothers me when fans of opposing teams make comments like that. They don't know the first thing about how important he is or how good he has been. I think a lot of people are just quick to look at interception totals or if you're looking at pass rushers, sack totals, there's more to it than that. And why teams prioritize re-signing certain players over others. And in the case of Christian Benford, he checks so many boxes in terms of what he means to this team.
Some folks just getting in here late. The Bills re-signed or extended Christian Benford's contract 4 years, $76 million. He ranks 13th according to Spot Track in average annual salary of NFL cornerbacks. That's going to obviously go down quite a bit by the time he was scheduled to be a free agent this time next year. So a pretty good deal for Brandon Beane. We talked a bunch about it on this episode. Turning Stone on the 24th. Wingnuts on Millersport on the 19th of April. It is going to be an absolutely electric month. I am headed down to the owners meetings tomorrow. Stay locked into X, Blue Sky, Syracuse.com, New York Upstate. I'll have coverage from Palm Beach at the owners meetings. We'll talk to Brandon tomorrow, obviously, about this Christian Benford signing for Ryan Talbot. I'm Matt Parrino. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everybody, and we'll see you very soon, Monday, the next podcast. Take care.